Nicola Sturgeon there saying there has been a material change. Well, to talk about this and a lot more, I'm joined tonight from the Highlands of Scotland by journalist Andreas Wolf. Andreas, it's good to see you. So we are coming off of that general election last week in the UK. Does Nicola Sturgeon, does she really have a mandate to push for another independence referendum in Scotland?
Well, Brent, it has been pointed out that the SNP only got 45% of the vote share here in Scotland in this general election. And not all of the voters that voted for the SNP may support independence. They may have voted for their local MP because they like their local MP. But on the other hand, the SNP government of Scotland and First Minister Nicola Sturgeon pointed out that they previously had 35 MPs. They now have 48 out of 59 MPs here in Scotland. And at the same time, the Tories, the Conservatives, lost 7 of their 13 MPs. So they think that that indicates that there is a change in voters' opinion. Polls suggest that there still is a very small majority of people in Scotland who oppose independence, that are pro-unionist. However, as we heard earlier, the First Minister has now sent a request to London to transfer powers to Scotland for a second independence referendum.
Yes, she's made that request. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is likely to reject that request. And Sturgeon, she says that she expects that to happen. So what do you think her strategy is here then?
Well, indeed, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has already rejected this request in Parliament today, pointing to the fact that even the SNP conceded in 2014, when the last Scottish independence referendum was held, that this was the opportunity of a generation. Now, I think it seems likely that Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP government here in Scotland are hoping to win this case by making an argument. As she outlined in her paper published today, there's been a distinct history here in Scotland. Scotland joined the Union in 1707 when the two parliaments united. She points to different institutions here in Scotland, different laws, a different court system, different police, a different health system, and even a different church. So a very distinct nation, she says, and she makes the case that it should be for the people of Scotland to decide the future of this nation.
Which they did back in the referendum in 2014. That referendum was supposed to be the referendum of a generation, and now we're talking about it again. Do you think that once Brexit actually begins, once Brexit is happening, that another independence referendum in Scotland, that referendum will become inevitable?
Well, inevitable is a strong word. But what I think, Nicola Sturgeon said it herself, that if the Westminster government, if Boris Johnson continuously rejects a second independence referendum, that this will only increase the support for such a referendum here in Scotland, as people kind of say, well, we're not being taken seriously by Westminster. That may well be the feeling amongst some independent supporters. And there are some voices even within the Conservative Party. Andrew Mitchell MP, a Tory MP and former government minister, said that he thinks there will be a second independence referendum, probably not next year in 2020, as Ms. Sturgeon would like, but possibly after the UK finally does leave the European Union entirely.
Yeah, Andreas, it is interesting. If you look at these two polls, you have a majority of Scots who say they want to stay in the UK, but you also have a majority of Scots who say they want to stay in the European Union. Those two realities have to diverge at some point. Are we going to see public opinion tip in favor of Scottish independence, do you think? I mean, something has to give here.
Indeed, 62% of the Scottish electorate voted to remain in the EU in 2016 in the EU referendum. And I think this is possibly also rooted in history. There was this old alliance, this alliance by Scotland and France in the Middle Ages, which lasted until the 18th century. And since then, there has really been much more of an internationalist, a European perspective here in Scotland than there maybe has been in parts of England. And whether this, whether which argument wins here, I'm not able to tell you today.
Yeah.
What I do think is going to be may well be an issue if there is continued rejection from Westminster for the people of Scotland to decide their own future. That may not play in their favour.
Well, we appreciate you trying to look into that crystal ball nonetheless tonight for us. Journalist Andreas Wolff joining us from the Highlands of Scotland. Andreas, thank you.